Okay, so you're here to get smart, fast, right? On something that matters. And today we're going deep on a role that's absolutely critical for any business that wants to do well, like really thrive.
The revenue manager.
Exactly, the revenue manager.
Mm.
So we've got two great sources here. One is Revenue Manager Interview Questions with Candidate Scorecard. It's from VVHR, and it came out July of last year.
2024.
Yep, 2024. And then we've also got Top 20 Revenue Manager Interview Questions and Answers, which is from August 2024.
August, yeah. So both pretty recent.
Super recent, and these really give us a good look into what revenue managers actually do, why they're so important. And then also, if you were kind of thinking about exploring this as a career, this gives you a peek behind the curtain as to like what the interview process might look like.
Yeah, you get a real feel for it.
So in this deep dive, we really want to tease out those core responsibilities of a revenue manager and then give you that sense of what the interview process looks like.
Yeah, kind of paint the whole picture.
So let's just dive right in. What fundamentally is the job of a revenue manager?
So at its core, a revenue manager is completely focused on boosting a company's financial performance.
Oh, okay.
And they do this by really digging into the data and analyzing trends and then using all that info to come up with pricing strategies
Smart.
that are designed to really maximize revenue and ultimately make the company as profitable as possible.
So it's way more than just figuring out, what price tag to put on something.
Oh, absolutely.
This is like
Yeah, strategic.
big picture stuff.
It's very data-driven.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that a revenue manager actually does on a regular basis?
Well, one of the biggest things is keeping a close eye on what's happening in the market.
Mm-hmm.
What's the competition doing?
Makes sense.
What are the trends? And they use that to create those pricing strategies we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also always watching how supply and demand are shifting.
Right, because if nobody wants what you're selling, you don't want to charge an arm and a leg for it.
Exactly. You got to be flexible and adjust based on what's happening.
Well,
And to make those decisions, the smart ones, they're really relying on data analytics
yeah.
to forecast what future revenue might look like.
Okay, so this is where the numbers come in.
Oh, yeah. And one metric that I saw pop up a lot, especially in the hotel industry, is RevPAR.
RevPAR.
Yeah. It stands for revenue per available room.
Got it.
It's like the key way to measure how well a hotel is filling its rooms at a good rate and just their overall financial health.
So are revenue managers basically just crunching numbers all day long?
No, not at all. They can't just sit in the silo.
Right.
Collaboration is a huge part of the job.
I would imagine.
They work really closely with sales and marketing
Makes sense.
to make sure everyone's on the same page about those financial goals for the company.
So everyone's working together towards that same objective.
Exactly. And they're also managing inventory to make sure you have the right amount of whatever it is you're selling
Okay.
to get that sweet spot of high occupancy and the best possible rates.
So it's all about having the right product or service available to the right people at the right price.
That's a great way to put it.
Thanks.
And it doesn't stop there. Revenue managers are constantly reviewing how things are performing,
Right.
analyzing what's working, what's not, and then tweaking their strategies.
Okay.
And they're also looking ahead, forecasting future revenue by digging into past sales data, looking at seasonal trends, and just considering what's happening in the wider market.
So it's like a constant cycle of analyze, plan, adjust, repeat.
Yeah, you could say that.
So why has this role become so important? It seems pretty fundamental to a business's success.
Oh, it absolutely is. A revenue manager is like the heart of a company's profitability and financial health.
Okay.
They're making data-driven decisions that are really guiding the company's performance.
Mm-hmm.
And in today's world, businesses are relying on data more and more across all areas. So that means the need for skilled revenue managers who can provide those insights is just going to keep growing.
Makes sense. So we've got a good handle on what a revenue manager does and why it's such a crucial role.
Yep.
So now let's talk about what someone could expect if they were going in for an interview for this kind of position.
Okay, so based on what we've read, the interviews for these roles typically cover a bunch of different areas.
Okay.
Like you're going to get questions about your technical skills, how you've handled things in the past, like behavioral questions, hypothetical on-the-job challenges, like situational questions.
Right.
And of course, questions about your background and work experience.
So pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, they want to get a good sense of who you are.
Okay, so let's break it down, starting with the technical side. What are some of the questions an interviewer might ask?
Well, first off, be prepared to talk about your experience with different revenue management systems.
Okay.
Our sources mention RevPAR again,
Right.
but also STR, which is Smith Travel Research. They provide benchmarking data for hotels, and then Oracle Opera, which is a property management system that's pretty popular.
So you're going to want to know those systems like inside and out.
Yeah, be familiar with them for sure. And then they'll probably also want to know how you go about setting pricing strategies.
Okay.
So be ready to talk about how you analyze market trends, competitor pricing, and of course, understanding what customers want and how much they're willing to pay.
Right. It's not just pulling numbers out of thin air.
No, it's all about the data.
Data. Data.
And yeah, RevPR is probably going to come up again.
Big
You want to be
Daddy.
able to explain what it is and why it's so important for gauging performance and profitability.
Especially in that hotel industry, it seems like.
Yeah, that's where it's really key. And then they might also ask about your process for analyzing those market trends.
Okay.
So be ready to talk about your favorite data analytics tools and how you go about benchmarking against competitors. And another big one is demand forecasting. So how you use historical data, seasonal patterns, and market conditions to predict what demand will be in the future.
Okay, so that was a lot on the technical side. What about the behavioral questions? What are interviewers looking for there?
Well, those questions are all about trying to understand how you've acted in past work situations.
Okay.
So they might ask you to describe a time when you faced a big challenge in revenue management and what you did about it.
Okay.
Like one of our sources mentioned declining occupancy rates because prices were set too high.
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah. So be ready to explain how you'd spot something like that and then what steps you'd take to fix it.
So it's not just about saying you have the skills, it's about showing that you've actually used them.
Exactly. They want to see it in action.
Show, don't tell.
Yeah. And they'll also want to know how you prioritize tasks, especially when you're juggling multiple projects.
Right, because that's the reality.
Oh, for sure.
Nobody's only working on one thing at a time.
So have some strategies ready to share on how you stay organized and manage your workload.
Got it.
And teamwork's another big one. They might ask about a time when you had to work with a difficult colleague and how you handled that.
Because being able to communicate and work well with others is super important in any role, but especially this one, it seems like.
Yeah, you're constantly collaborating with different teams.
Right.
So they want to know you can navigate those tricky interpersonal situations.
Makes sense.
And then you might also get asked about your involvement in successful marketing campaigns.
Okay.
Like one example was an email campaign offering a seasonal discount that led to more bookings.
Nice.
So be ready to talk about your specific role in that and what impact you had.
Show those results.
Exactly. And then lastly, be prepared to talk about how you handle feedback and criticism.
Because nobody's perfect.
Right. It's all about showing that you're open to learning and growing.
Okay, cool. So situational questions, these are always interesting because they put you on the spot a bit.
Yeah, they're like little mini case studies.
Right? Like, what would you do in this situation?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you might get asked what you'd do if you saw a sudden drop in revenue.
Oh, like out of nowhere.
Yeah, like a big red flag. And they'll want to see how you think on your feet and how you'd approach solving that problem.
Yeah, break down that process.
Another common one is how you'd react if a competitor suddenly slashed their prices.
Okay, that's a tricky one.
Yeah, you have to think strategically.
For sure.
They might also ask how you'd allocate a limited marketing budget.
Okay.
So you'd want to talk about prioritizing the channels that are going to give you the best bang for your buck.
Right. The highest return on investment.
Exactly. And another scenario could be having two super important projects with the same deadline.
Ugh, I hate when that happens.
Stuff.
Mhm.
So how would you decide which one to prioritize?
Yeah, you'd have to make a judgment call.
And then lastly, be prepared to talk about the steps you'd take if your company decided to implement a brand new revenue management system.
Okay.
They want to see that you're adaptable and eager to learn new tools.
Gotcha. So we've covered technical, behavioral, situational. What's next?
Background and experience.
Okay, back to basics. So what kind of questions fall into this category?
Well, these are all about getting to know your professional journey and how your experience lines up with the job.
Okay.
So they'll probably start by asking what drew you to revenue management in the first place.
Like what got you interested in this field?
Exactly. And then they'll want to hear about your previous roles and what you achieved there.
Okay.
Like, did you implement a dynamic pricing model that boosted occupancy rates or revenue?
So quantify those achievements.
Yeah, show them the impact you had.
Back it up with numbers.
Exactly. And then be ready to talk about how you stay up to date on industry trends.
Right.
Like, do you read certain publications, attend webinars, or belong to any professional organizations?
Yeah, all that good stuff.
And then they might ask about the tools and software you're familiar with, like Excel CRM systems, revenue management software.
Right. Those are all pretty standard these days.
And then lastly, they'll probably want to know about your long-term career goals. Where do you see yourself going in this field?
So they get a sense of your ambition.
Exactly. So yeah, you're going to want to do your research and be prepared to really talk about yourself and your experience.
It sounds like thorough preparation is key for anyone going for a revenue manager role.
Oh, absolutely. You've got to have a deep understanding of what the role entails and be able to clearly articulate your expertise
Right.
and use examples to back up your claims and then make the most of that interview time you have.
Yeah, that face-to-face is crucial.
Oh, for sure. And, one of our sources actually had a revenue manager candidate scorecard,
Oh, wow.
which was really interesting. It showed what they look at when they're evaluating candidates.
Okay. Ability.
So it's things like your education, your work experience, your technical qualifications, problem-solving skills,
Yeah.
communication, how well you'd fit into the company's culture, and even if the role aligns with your career goals.
Wow, so they're really looking at the whole package.
Yeah, they want to make sure it's a good fit all around.
Okay, so if we had to summarize all of this, what are the key takeaways for someone who's either trying to understand this role better or preparing for an interview?
Well, first and foremost, you have to understand that a revenue manager's main job is to use data to create pricing strategies that maximize revenue and boost profitability for the company.
Right, they're the ones making sure the money's coming in.
Exactly. And you should be familiar with all the different tasks involved, like monitoring the market, managing inventory, forecasting revenue,
Yeah.
and working closely with other teams.
So it's a multifaceted role.
Very much so. And then when it comes to the interview, you should expect a pretty thorough grilling.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
They're going to ask technical questions to see what you know about systems and strategies,
Uh-huh.
behavioral questions, where you'll need to give examples of how you've handled things in the past,
Right.
situational questions to test your problem-solving skills.
Okay.
And then, of course, questions about your background and experience.
So what are some actionable steps people can take to prepare?
Research the company you're interviewing with and their competition. Show them that you understand the industry.
Good tip.
And when you're answering those behavioral questions, use the STAR method. That's situation, task, action, result.
Okay.
It's a great way to structure your answers and make sure you're hitting all the key points.
Love it.
And then make sure you're connecting your skills and experience to what's listed in the job description.
Right. Tailor those responses.
And whenever you can back up your claims with numbers, show them the impact you've had.
Numbers don't lie.
Exactly. And then lastly, come prepared with some thoughtful questions to ask the interviewer. It shows you're engaged and interested.
Great advice. So to wrap it all up, it seems like the keys to success in this field are really understanding the role of a revenue manager and then just being super prepared for that interview.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so here's a final thought to ponder. With all this data that businesses have access to now, how do you think the role of a revenue manager might change in the next 10 years?
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, and what new skills do you think will be absolutely essential in this field as businesses try to navigate this, increasingly complex marketplace?
It's definitely something to think about. The future of revenue management is wide open.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
My pleasure.
Catch you next time.
See ya.